So you're walking in a cemetery to find the grave sites of some of your ancestors. But some of the grave markers are in pretty bad shape. What can you do? What should you do? What shouldn't you do? Let's find out. Welcome to Maestro Heights. Greetings, everyone. This is Gail Masinda with Maestro Heights. Just some reminders. Be sure to ask any questions you might have in the comments below. Give us the thumbs up when you learn something new. And as always, please subscribe to this channel and click that notification bell so you'll know every time we upload a new video. Okay, let's get started. Our guest today is Martin Reichel. And Martin, I would like it if you would tell us a little bit, how do you know about all of these things that we're going to be talking about today?
Well, basically, it's because I've been in the monument business, although I'm retired now, for over 40 years. And even while I was in high school, I worked for my father-in-law in the monument business and have learned a lot over the years. Not just about cleaning and caring for monuments, but lots more about different types of materials, so on and so forth. So it's been my career for a long, long time. I guess that qualifies me.
It certainly does. Well, this was not, my next question is not exactly part of our discussion today, but I've been curious. I hear the terms gravestone, headstone, tombstone, grave markers. These are used, and you use monument. Are these terms somewhat interchangeable, even though I know historically they meant something different, but in today's usage?
In today's usage, yeah, they're kind of interchangeable. Years ago, you had headstones and footstones to mark out the body where it's resting in the cemetery, so you know which end is which. The footstones disappeared later on, and it was just the headstone. And in the business, the monument business, anything consisting of an upright tablet with a base underneath it is a monument. Anything that's just a single stone placed on the ground would be a marker or a grave marker. And then you have flush markers that are flat with the ground, or you mow over them and that sort of thing. So there's all kinds of different terms that are bandied about. And generally speaking, everybody will figure out, well, it's something about a stone in a cemetery.
I understand that. If we're going to be walking in a cemetery, are there some basic things that we should carry with us, like a kit that might help with the maintenance of some of the grave markers that we encounter?
Well, I like to start with a quote from the Hippocratic Oath, which says, "First, do no harm." So when you're thinking about cleaning a particular headstone or marker, start with water. That's going to do no harm at all to the stone. And a lot of times you'll see these growths on stone. You have some pictures that you've shown me, lichens and moss and so on, usually in a shady areas where they predominate. And oftentimes if you just soak that with water and let it sit there for a while, and then maybe take a plastic putty knife and scrape the bulk of it off, and then scrub it with we used to use laundry detergent and water. And you may have to repeat that several times, but that will usually do the job on the marble monuments, which are mostly affected by this. The other monuments that began being used after the turn of the century, basically the 20th century, are granite, and they're not subject to the weathering that the marble headstones are. You will get maybe some growth on it, but it's not going to weather away like some of the lettering that you see that you can't make out, which is one of the reasons people think, well, I should clean this because maybe that'll make it more legible. It may or may not. If it's due to erosion, weathering over years, and marble is not really suitable for our climate, still used down south where you don't have freezing and thawing. But before 1900, marble was a material of choice because it was easy to work, easy to carve with hand tools and so on. But like I say, it does erode rapidly. Sometimes more, sometimes less. There's different kinds of marble. Some is harder than others. So yeah, so that's where we're at. Uh, you would want to take, buckets, water, uh, detergent, scrub brushes, preferably natural bristle brushes. Rather, don't use uh, uh, metal type brushes because you're going to leave rust stains on the stone if you do that. You don't want to use that. But nylon is fine for cleaning, and
Okay.
and
What
then
about the chemicals that people sometimes use? There's spray-on stuff that people use. Is that okay or not?
people have had a lot of success with this wet and forget,
Mhm.
which I've never used before because it wasn't around when I was in business. And so we used, the laundry detergent and
Mhm.
sometimes add a little bleach, although you don't want to use too much bleach because that can damage the stone too.
Mhm.
But the wet and forget, you just paint on or spray on and just leave it. And I've looked at a couple of them that had been done and actually did a pretty nice job. You don't want anything abrasive. You don't want to sand the surface off with
Mhm.
sandpaper or anything like that.
So just a little whisk broom to even clean up the grass clippings and some things like that. Maybe even some little clippers if you wanted to clip up some of the weeds and stuff that are growing around. Just
For
whatever you
sure.
would need to tidy it up.
Yeah, tidy it up. A person should clean their family stone once a year, just to take care of the grit and grime that can accumulate. And
Mhm.
most monuments being made out of granite nowadays, there's nothing much more that you need to do. However, there are some causes that are more problematic. If you've ever been to Kiwani in the Catholic cemetery there, practically every monument in there has a kind of a brownish cast to it. And I thought, well, gee, did a fire go through there or something and stained all these headstones? And then I got to thinking about the Kiwani Boiler Company, which for many, many years spewed pollution into the air, which damaged or at least stained the stones, and that's very hard to get out.
I
Uh,
would imagine there's a lot of places in our country that would have different kinds of reaction to whatever manufacturing processes were going on in that region over a period of time.
Sure, especially marble, which is very absorptive, or
Mhm.
limestone. Maybe you remember seeing the Presbyterian, the first Presbyterian church, which is made out of limestone, was practically black at one time. And they cleaned it all off. I'm not sure what they did, pressure washed it or something, but limestone does absorb pollution from the atmosphere. It might be exhaust from cars, you name it. It's hard to determine just what the cause is usually, but yeah.
I remember that there's a thing that we used to do when we were kids, and that was to take crayons and do rubbings across the front of the headstones. Is that an okay thing to do, or does it
Oh,
depend on the
sure.
circumstance?
You're not going to hurt the stone any. And yeah, that would be part of your kit to take to the cemetery because some stones that are hard to read, just looking at them, sometimes a rubbing will bring out the lettering much better. And then you might even be able to make out what it actually says, even if it's been eroded quite a bit.
Okay.
So I would encourage everybody to take crayon and paper. Tracing paper will allow you to see through it so you know what you're wanting to rub off. And then you need somebody to help you hold the paper on so it doesn't move on you, or tape it on there, whatever you need to do. But that's a really good solution to some of
Okay.
the legibility problems.
Okay. I know that there's specific information that's written on the different sides, like east facing and west facing.
Hmm.
Uh, Tell us about that, and then a corollary with that, does it make a difference for the weathering? Does like the east side get more than the west side or vice versa or whatever?
Well, the west side usually gets more weathering, or the south side, let's put it that way. The north side, just like moss grows on the north side of a tree, you're going to have growth on the north side of the monument because it doesn't get the benefit of sun, which has a bleaching effect. And if a stone is out in the middle of the cemetery where there's no trees or anything around, it's going to stay pretty clean just through the action of the sun and rain. But as far as facing the headstones are concerned, at Hope Cemetery, we run into a conglomeration of all sorts of different things. But the rule of thumb is that the heads are placed to the west and the feet to the east, so that on the Judgment Day, people can rise up and meet the angel Gabriel or whoever is coming with his horn to summon you to wherever you're going. And
So it's a traditional way of doing it.
that's a traditional way, and it's still pretty much adhered to in cemeteries where things are facing east and west. When you get into a curved area, well, it's a whole different ball game. But yeah, and that's where the headstone term comes from, because it would be placed at the head of the body.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Hope Cemetery, which Hope Cemetery is in Galesburg, Illinois, and it's a very traditional cemetery. It is the oldest of the local cemeteries around here, and it is privately owned. I went out a couple days ago and took some pictures of some different situations in varying degrees of disrepair. And if you could take a minute and tell us a little bit about them, then that would be just super, super helpful. What these are made out of, what can we do about it, or if we should just leave it alone. So whatever.
Well, this particular plaque is in front of the mausoleum there. I recognize it. It's made out of bronze, and bronze is a material that, after a period of time of being out in the weather, gets a natural patina, which is usually a greenish cast to it, and that protects it from further deterioration. However, on this particular plaque, you've got some kind of growth going on too. I believe it faces to the north, so it doesn't get the sunlight, and you might try some things to get the black off of it, but you don't want to remove the entire patina because, first of all, that would be difficult to do and would require harsh chemicals or sandblasting, and you don't want to do either one of those. So possibly some soap mixed with a little bleach might take some of that blackness off of there and scrub it good. You can give it a try.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's look at our next one here. This one, I love these white bronze monuments. They are so crisp and so clean, but obviously something happened to one of the panels. Can panels like that be replaced or reconstructed somehow?
Well, the companies that built these monuments right around the turn of the century, from about 1880 to 1910 or whatever, they're no longer in existence. And I don't know of anybody who would be capable of making a cast zinc product without great expense. If you went to a bronze foundry or something like that and asked to see if they could make something like that, that might be possible. But these are made out of cast zinc, and they have withstood the elements for a long time, and they look like they're brand new when you look at them, but they're hollow, they're bolted together. And people used to say that bootleggers put their whiskey inside these hollow monuments and then covered it up, and they knew where they could get it. But yeah, and they resist any kind of growth because of the metal that they're made out of. It naturally repels. Copper will kill most any kind of vegetative growth.
Could a panel be made out of some other material, even though it wouldn't match, just to complete something like this?
Yeah, you could make it out of bronze. there's plenty of bronze foundries across the country making the flat metal markers that you find at cemeteries that like those types of things. But it would be a custom made thing, and custom made things are expensive.
That kind of goes together, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now here we have one that this isn't even legible anymore.
Right.
Is this just corrosion?
It's just a weathering. It's probably a softer marble. Don't know which way this one faces. Maybe it faces the west, but in any case, freezing and thawing in our climate will eventually erode the surface. And even though you can see that there are letters there, it would be rubbing might help a little bit, but probably not. This is really in bad shape, and there's not a thing you can do about it.
In the cemetery records, are there any listings for what these markers originally said, or is it just the listing of who and when that are in those cemetery records?
Well, the cemetery records are really pretty good, although they weren't developed until maybe 30 or 40 years had gone by since the founding of the cemetery. And they consist of an interment record, which is a chronological record of burial, starting with the first one in 1836. So that's actually a year before Galesburg was founded, and continuing on in chronological order. And the lot numbers and the grave numbers are included with that information. Then there's also a lot diagram book, which diagrams every single lot and shows where the placements of the graves are and the names and their burial numbers, which would refer to the interment record. And then there's an index, which records pretty much everything that happens with regard to a particular name. When they bought the plot, they'd be recorded there. When it was used, it would be recorded, and so on and so forth. So the records are pretty good.
But not the actual marker information, though.
No, they would not provide the marker information. Marker information can be gotten from the Genealogical Society's tombstone inscriptions, which, of course, one like this, they wouldn't be able to read, so there would be no inscription, but legible inscriptions were copied into a book showing every burial that they looked at and took the information off the stones themselves. So even in the intervening years, I think they did that in 1976, some of these stones may have become illegible in that time, but there is a record with the Genealogical Society's publication of the tombstone inscriptions. Yeah.
It's an important work that people have done through the years of keeping track of these things. Now, here we have three markers that are easy to read, but they've got other issues with being all lopsided. Can or should anything be done with that?
Well, certainly. And over the years, a lot of tilting monuments and so on, especially if they are in danger of falling onto someone that might get injured by them, those have been straightened up mostly by volunteers. The cemetery doesn't have the capacity to, they don't have the manpower. Basically, we just mow and trim, and the headstones have to stay the way they are until somebody comes along to fix them. Wouldn't take too much to jack these up with a pry bar, put some gravel underneath them so that they're back to level again, and they would certainly look a lot better.
Yeah, they would. Okay, now this one's got growth on it, like we were talking about earlier, the lichen and the moss and all like that. Is this the kind that you were thinking of?
Yeah.
Clean? Okay.
Yeah, this could be cleaned, and the inscription actually is still pretty vibrant. Letters that are cut deep show up better than letters that are not cut so deep.
Sure.
And it's all a matter of the contrast. Now you'll notice that there's growth inside those letters, and once that's cleaned out, actually it'll be a little less legible because you don't have the dark, normally you depend on the light, the ambient light, to create a shadow inside the letters, and that's what makes it legible. And if they're cut good and deep, they're more legible than if they're not.
That makes sense too. Okay.
Yep.
Now this one is just kind of a combination of, looks like even mowing clippings are sticking to it as well.
Yeah.
As the other things. Is that so? We just start with our soft brush on that one, and then see what we've got.
Yeah, this has got quite a bit of growth that's actually protruding out quite a bit from the surface. And that's a case where you'd want to maybe take a plastic scraper of some kind and scrape the larger protuberances off, and then start soaking it with water and maybe some detergent to try to clean it up. Okay. In worst cases, I don't encourage the use of bleach, but if you add bleach to your laundry detergent in your water, then it'll get the organic matter out quicker anyway, but it's not always advisable to use bleach.
I would think that if we are using a detergent or a bleach or whatever like that, we need to make sure that we have the clear water with us also in order to rinse it off when we're done.
Absolutely. There's clear water rinse is required in every case to make sure that you get any offending material off that could eat into the stone later on. So you want to make sure you thoroughly rinse it.
Very good. Okay, sometimes we have sad situations like this where it just breaks. Is there anything that can be done on stones like this?
Well, these are problematic because the breaks are old. If it had just broken yesterday, it could probably be glued back together again. But in the meantime, the edges that have to meet have eroded away. So you don't have enough contact points for glue to hold it together. And in that case, one of the things that we used to do when somebody said, well, this is terrible, but we can't glue it back together, you can take the stone and embed it in a flat concrete platform. And that way it's protected from lawnmowers. It doesn't look bad, and is an option, if you wanted to preserve it.
Now, here's an example where somebody tried something, at least on a temporary basis. We have the front and the back of the same stone here. It looks like there's a loop in the back where they were trying to support it with the rebar or whatever that is.
Yeah, that's a fence post is what that is. And yeah, it's not a good idea for the most part, because the fence posts rust and the rust bleeds onto the stone. And obviously it was an amateur that wanted to keep it upright, and it's not a method that I would recommend for sure.
Sometimes our intentions are good, but it doesn't always work in the long term. So I admire that they were dedicated enough to whoever this person was to try, but didn't really help the cause ultimately, did it?
No, it doesn't look a whole lot better than it did before, I'm sure. And when you're taking care of your own monuments in the cemetery, there's a few don'ts that you should pay attention to. Don't wrap wire around it to hold a bouquet in place, because the wire is going to rust. Don't put a shepherd's hook hanging over the stone, which if it's not kept up, will rust too and bleed rust down onto the stone itself, which rust is pretty hard to get out. So you have to use something like oxalic acid. And most people are not in a position to have it or use it.
No, I wouldn't have even thought about that location of the shepherd's hook. It makes perfect sense. I just didn't think about it. This is why you're here with us today, Martin. I appreciate it. Okay, now we have two different stones here. This is where Mary Allen West is laid to rest, and those of you who know me know that I do an awful lot of impressions of Mary Allen West around here. So these are particularly important and significant to me. It's bothered me that this one, the larger of the markers, is hers, and it is askew. Can you tell me what happened with that?
Well, I think it was a tree limb that came down either during a storm, or it might have fallen on there when someone was trimming or cutting a tree down. But I'm inclined to think it was a storm that knocked a large branch off, which struck the top part of the monument there and caused it to shift. And it wouldn't take too much with someone that knows how to do it to put it back into its proper position. But I see it needs some cleaning too.
It does.
Yeah, including her father there, Nehemiah West. Right.
And they're hard to read. I've also noticed that down here on the base of this one, it almost looks like there's some erosion to the, I don't know what you call it, the base that the thing is setting on. Is that what's going on there? Is that problematic? Is that
no, it actually looks pretty level and plumb. The foundation.
Level, but it's just these gaps under here that get my marker out of it, and you can see.
That's not uncommon, and it's not due to anything that's been happening to the stone. It was put in that way. Her monument is made out of granite, and granite only erodes 1/16 of an inch every 10,000 years, so you're not going to have to worry about it.
Cool.
But it could use some cleaning, right? The footings might go down 4 or 5 feet, and they could be just laid up brick, or sometimes stone rubble. And nowadays, of course, it's poured concrete is what is used for the foundation. But back then, a lot of different treatments were used.
Is Nehemiah's marker then, is that marble?
That's marble.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll learn. Keep teaching me. I appreciate it. Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we close out today? Are we good?
No, I think we pretty well covered everything. I would mention wet and forget is something you can try to see how well it works. Apparently, you just paint it on and just leave it, and it's supposed to do the job. I'm not sure what the components are, but they say there's no bleach in it, there's no acid in it. So those are the two main things that can cause damage if not properly used.
Well, we'll take a look at that and get back to you on that one. Martin, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your information. This has been great.
Happy to do it.
Okay, everybody, remember to subscribe to this channel. And as always, like and share the video. Remember, we learn from the past, but we do not live there. Go be awesome today and make your own history. Stick around for some more videos. Bye for now.